Hi everybody, hello, my name is Philip Espinoza, and this topic for this video is going to be on the word indigenous and what it means and how it's used and why I really don't like it being used, why I don't like when people say that, oh, you're indigenous, or when people call themselves indigenous when they're really not. So that's what this video is about. And I'm going to start off by the definition, the etymology of the word indigenous. It's from the 1640s. It means born in a country or native. It's from the Latin word indigena. So, I mean, if you think about the roots of the word itself, indigena, I mean, what does that say in itself? It's derived from Spanish. So there's a problem right there. It means a native, a literally inborn person. And other things are in, within, and so on and so forth. And so basically, I mean, there's a whole bunch of terms like, okay, you have the word American Indian, Native American, First Nations, Aboriginal, and then you have Indigenous. I'm going to touch on Indigenous, and I'll touch on the other words later on in some other story. So, the word Indigenous, you might hear that a lot in debates about illegal immigration. That's usually where it comes up. The word Indigenous will come up when you have somebody who's in favor of immigration or pro-migrant, I guess, to be politically correct. They would say that I'm indigenous to this continent, so I deserve to be here. There is no borders before you came here. You set up the borders, and now I'm illegal to this continent. They'll use that indigenous phrase to gain leverage in a political argument, and that's probably the number one reason why I'm against that word. When you use the word indigenous to just gain leverage for yourself in a political argument, to gain some kind of entitlement, like you have a right to be here, then that's a little bit wrong, especially if you are not indigenous to the area. There's a difference if you're indigenous to the continent and if you're indigenous to the area. You don't just like wander from people's homes. Like, I don't wander down the street to my neighbor's home and say, I have a right to be here because I'm indigenous to the same street. It's ridiculous. Like, even though there weren't specific borders and boundaries, doesn't mean that it was like willy-nilly. You can do whatever you want, go to whatever area that you want without. You can't just like set a home up in any area, and that's not how it went down. And if you want to convince yourself of that, you're just lying to yourself, just so you can gain a cheap political argument, just so you can win one. And so that's one of the main reasons why I don't like it. The second reason is the word indigenous itself is used too broadly. It's used too generally. People say, oh, I'm indigenous, and so when they look at Native Americans, they'll say, okay, if this Hispanic person, if this Mexican person is indigenous, then you have a Native American person. It kind of lumps their stories together. Yeah, it lumps the struggle together. It's not the same struggle, and for you just to generalize it like that, you might as well be putting on a headdress and running around playing Indian in Indian costumes. It's the same thing. You just want to put on the headdress so you can have a political political strength to your argument. So put on that headdress. If you want to use the word indigenous, put on the headdress. It's the same thing. Now there's a difference. If you actually have connections to the land, that's the appropriate usage of indigenous. But when you're going to use it as a blanket term like Asians, then that's the problem right there. Why are you okay with using the word indigenous, but you are against using the word Asian because it's too much of a blanket term? It's the same thing. You're causing the same damage by lumping all Asians together. You're lumping all indigenous people together, quote unquote indigenous. And so those are the main reasons why I'm against it. And like, it depends on the circumstance. Like I said, there's times where I will use the word, but when you're using it for a cheap political argument, just for your own selfish purposes, just because you think, like, well, you know, my skin is brown, and, you know, I'm Mexican, so, you know, I was probably from this area sometime, so sure, people came over and, you know, we mixed a little bit, but for the most part, I am indigenous to the continent, you know, that's when we have a problem. And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from doing more introspection with who they actually are and their identity. If you want to go look up your past, then go for it. But as for the word indigenous, those are just my thoughts. You don't see those indigenous people at the protests, at the illegal immigration protests. You don't see them out here. You don't see them doing that. It's different. So that's just how I feel about the indigenous peoples of America. This area in California is not the same as Chile, or not the same as Argentina. And I don't know much more to say. So those are my thoughts. If you don't agree, that's fine. I'm not asking you to agree, I'm just asking you to reconsider the way you use indigenous. And this is addressed to all people in the academic field, especially ethnic studies people in the revolutionary scene. Think about how you use the word indigenous. Alright. See ya.